Hello everyone, it's Gene with G Squared Tactical, and yes, I'm still on vacation. No, I still haven't got to shoot my CZ 600 ST1 chambered in 223. One might ask, well, I thought you were on vacation. Like, what are you doing? Last video you didn't have a scope. Said you would be looking for one. Why don't you wait till you get home? Well, obviously you don't know me. You know, if it's sitting in front of me and it needs something, well, then I want to fix that. And as I mentioned, it needed a scope, and I did go out and pick up this Vortex Intrepid 412 by 40 rifle scope, and I have it mounted up here. So if I was looking to buy this rifle and put a scope on it, this video to me would be extremely beneficial. I would be extremely happy that someone took the time to do this video, because here's what I ran into. The drama was unreal. My wife can tell you, to actually be able to get this scope mounted up here. So we'll start from the beginning. So I purchased the gun at Bud's Gun Shop. Personally walked in, it was on the shelf. They have them all out on display there in the floor for everybody to maul them and touch them, and I never buy anything that's sitting out like that for 100 people to be touching and throwing back up there. But surprisingly, it was in mint condition, so I said fine, let's do it. Got a tremendous price on it, I think like $605 or something out the door. So it was a wonderful, great price, good experience. Got the gun, and I asked the guy at the counter, I said, what type of, does this gun come with a rail piece to mount, a base to mount your scope? And the guy behind him said, no, you'll have to get that at CZ, from CZ. And the guy I asked the question to said it's probably just a Remington 700 mount. The guy behind him said, no, it's proprietary to CZ. I'm like, okay, well, which is it? So I look up on CZ's website. It's very vague, but it does say threaded, or I'm sorry, drilled and tapped for the Remington 700 bases. And I even said as much when I did the review, or the couple of shorts that I did. And technically it is, but that's where the trouble starts. I looked on CZ's website. If I would have ordered it off of CZ's website, that would have allowed me to box it up and put it away and deal with it when I got home, right? But I didn't want to pay $100 or $120, depending on where you go, for a single piece rail or base to go on this gun if it was, you know, drilled and tapped for a Remington 700. And in my mind, again, I don't know this to be a fact, you can insert the magazine here and you can load this from the top, right? So in my mind, I was thinking, if I have a single piece rail, train track rail, if you will that impede or inhibit me from loading it from the top? Again, I don't know that it will. I'm not saying that it will. I'm saying it just looked as though it might make that more difficult, if not impossible. Again, I just don't know. So I wanted the two-piece. So I'm looking around, nobody has it. They say, well, we don't have any of them. We don't even have the train track here at Bud's. And so I went over to the gun and knife store. I called over to the Smoky Mountain Gun and Ammo over in Knoxville. Nobody had it, didn't have a two-piece or anything. So I went back down to the gun and knife store in the basement down there, and they found me these Leopold Rifleman Remington 700 Matte 55890 two-piece here, and told me that it would work for the Remington 700. Little did I know at the time that the Rifleman was Leopold's Chinese offering, if you will. It's basically a cheaper offering from them, a Chinese product, or made in China, if you will. I had no clue. There's $8 or something out the door on sale. It says $9.99 on the packaging, but I got it cheaper than that. I come home, or back to the camper, I mount them on here. This one on the front here mounts up beautifully. The screws go down in there. I put a dab of Loctite. Everything's great. This one here, seemingly, it went down in there Everything seemed fine. I went to move my bolt and the bolt was seized up. The screws had went too far down in. They came with it, as it came with 2 shorter screws on the front, 2 longer screws for the rear, and the rear screws that it came with were just too long, and it touched the bolt just enough to keep it from moving. So back to the store I went. So what do? I went back up to the Bass Pro Shop here in Kodiak, Tennessee. Talked to them over there. They said, dude, just get the Remington 700 brand single piece train track rail. Just get that, it'll be fine. Mount that on there and everything will be great. So I got it. I picked it up, brought it back to the camper. I go to put it on there, and either the rear would line up or the front would line up, but together they wouldn't line up, as the rail was just too long. The screws in no way from front to back would line up. I'm like, I'm about to pull my hair out. I'm literally at this point going crazy. Like, what in the world, dude? But during that process, what I found out is that the 2 screws that were too long in the Rifleman 55-890 here, there were 2 screws that were slightly shorter in the Remington 700 single piece rail that I purchased, and I was able to use those shorter screws on the Rifleman rear section of the 2-piece here, and it worked out perfectly. Didn't come down too far, not even close. Didn't impede my boat or not allow me to move it. Everything was beautiful with that. But I was like, so what have I done? I bought a $50 rail for 2 screws. So I'm like, all right, finally got the base mounted on here. Let me run back up here and pick me up a scope. So I did. Again, went and picked up this Vortex scope, got it on sale. I think I ended up with the Cabela rings and the scope out the door for like $207 or something. Thought it was a great deal. I'm not really looking for super long range or anything from this rifle. I want to have fun somewhere around 100 yards, so that's what I did. And that's why I went with this scope. All right. I go back up to Bass Pro. I explained to them what's going on and that it wouldn't line up. They seemed as bamboozled as I was. They sent me over to an optic guy at the counter. He's definitely retired, only works 1 or 2 days a week. He starts talking to me and he explains to me, he's like, yes, it's drilled and tapped for the Remington 700, but what that means is that the distance between the front 2 screws and the distance between the back 2 screws, independently of one another, are the right distance apart. They're the right thread, the right diameter for the Remington 700. It doesn't mean that between the front and the rear that it's going to be the same distance. I had no idea that was the case. That was very much so news to me. So he said, you're going to have to get the 2-piece unless you want to order the plate from, you know, from CZ. So I was like, well, I got the 2-piece. This is what I got here. And it works out fine. And I told him about the 2 screws I had to take out of the Remington, you know, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, since the guy behind the counter told you wrong, just bring it back up here. We'll exchange it. So I was able to get my money back for the Remington rail. You know, shout out to them for allowing me to do that, right? So anyway, I went ahead at that point, got the scope, as I mentioned already, and I got the Cabela rings. So I come back, already have my 2-piece mounted up here with the screws that came out of the Remington 700 rail packaging, and the front 2 is the one that came out of the Rifleman from Leopold here, right? Got it on there, got my scope, looks like everything's gonna line up great. I go to put the Cabela rings on there, and the Cabela ring says that the slot, or the piece that goes down into the slot, was for Weaver or Picatinny. This also said the same exact thing. on the manufacturer's website. So I'm like, great, it'll work out wonderful, but it didn't. So I go back up there again. I talk to the guy at the optics, and he's like, well, a lot of times what happens is on the Cabela's rings, for some reason, that's a little bit too thick and it won't go into the universal cross slots or what have you, which you'll find on the Rifleman here. And you'll have to take and file down the inside of the slot here, one side or the other, just ever so slightly to make it fit down in there. Or you could just return the Cabela rings. And he took me over and he said, since you have the Rifleman two-piece from Leopold, just get the Rifleman rings, which I didn't even know was a thing. So the rings I got were these same Rifleman rings, and he said it'll fit in that cross slot without a problem. Turns out that's true. I brought it back. I put the Rifleman rings, they fit down in there just perfectly. And as you can see, I got the scope mounted here. Now I just have to get it home, get it zeroed. Again, this is the scope that I purchased for it. And I just, again, this video may not be garbage to anybody, may be garbage actually to anyone, but for me, if I was mounting this and I didn't want to spend $120 on CZ's website to buy a single piece base for this, this would be invaluable to me. And I thought that I would do the video for that reason, because again, you can go and spend 10 bucks or less for the Rifleman two-piece here. You can spend about 25 bucks on the Rifleman 1-inch rings. And for about 35 bucks, you can have a mounting system here that will, allow you to put whatever scope you would like to put on there. With that being said, I know everybody's gonna ask, well, what size were the screws that you used in the rear here that worked out fine? What was the length on those? What was the effective length on those? Well, I don't know. But you can find out by looking up the Remington 700 single piece rail, or base, should I say, the Remington 700 base for your Remington 700 drilled and tapped rifles, and look at the screw sizes that are in there, the longer of the two, or they may have been the same size or length. I don't even remember, honestly. Everything's like a blur with this thing, but the screws that were in that packaging would be the length of screw that you would need to make this work. So if you can go to your hardware store or wherever, if you can get that screw size, that's what you'll need for the rear here, and that will allow you to mount your base, and also allow you to put your scope on here should you be okay with the Rifleman series here. That will allow you to get this mounting system ready and set up to receive your scope for about 35 bucks versus, and that's with the rings, versus buying $120 plate straight from CZ, and on top of that buying the rings. So at that point you're probably 170 bucks in or something. So for 35 bucks you can do the same thing, and it works out, locked down great. Everything looks good. I like the way it looks on there, and there'll be no impeding of me top loading the magazine here. I hope the video was helpful. If you have any questions, we always comment back in the comment section without fail. No one goes unnoticed. No one goes without getting a comment back. So just ask us the question. Make sure you check out our website at gsquaredtactical.com. Buy some gear, help us out, and make sure you hit that thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe, and may God bless you.